Just a warning that this episode deals with adult themes of murder and of abortion, and the content may not be suitable for all ages, so listener discretion is advised.
He said, "You know what this is?" I said, "Yeah, it's a razor blade." He said, "I got you at my mercy, don't you?"
And here, they were guards and I was a convict. And that's the way it was. You knew where you were.
He says, "I wish you would just learn to behave like ladies."
And he said, "If you draw any blood, I'll kill every man in there." So the man dropped the knife and turned to the other men that were with him that he had set loose out of the various cells and said, "Well, he means it. He'll kill us if we don't give up." So they gave up.
You do your own number, you do your own time. If you hear something, you keep it within yourself. If you see something, you're blind to it. I don't care if it's a killing or whatever. You just don't see it.
All right. Well, welcome to Behind Gray Walls, a podcast about the old Idaho State Penitentiary and the men and women that called this place home. My name is Anthony, and I'm sitting in the studio with brilliant Skye.
Stop calling me that. Hi,
also
everyone.
known as Star this morning.
Yeah, a coworker called me Star, despite the fact that I have been working here with her since May of last year, so
Yes.
a year, a full year. She claims it's because there were stars on your shirt, and
Yes,
so that's why
I do have
you
stars
do.
all over
Yes,
my shirt.
white stars.
I get called Andrew and Alexander a lot, and I just roll with it. So Star's not a bad thing.
I told someone that your name was Anthony, and then immediately they called you Tony.
Good. I mean, at least they're in the right direction. It's not Alexander.
Alexander is. I think you should have. Did you? You just rolled with it. You said.
did.
Yeah,
I was
you
just
just
like-
had to be like, "Yep, that's my name." Yeah, that's a good name. It's a classic regal name.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, we have gotten very off track already.
We have a lot to discuss today. Probably 2 hours.
Hopefully not. I'm gonna do my best. So yeah, I've got a big one. You've got kind of a smaller one, right?
Yeah, mine is just like an easy, funny.
Okay.
It's not. I mean, it is prison time, but the reason he's in here is, I don't know. I try to lighten the mood
Sure.
based off
Yeah.
of yours. So
Yep.
you want to start off with yours?
Yeah.
And-
We can start off with mine, and we can
Let's
end
do
on
it.
yours. Yeah. So today I am talking about Josie Kensler.
Josie.
Number 565. She is probably one of the more interesting stories because her crime, just like Patrick that we talked about last time, the crime is interesting, but it really doesn't even start to touch what happens to her after she's in prison.
Absolutely.
So she came in on May 28th, 1897. And I don't want to say what her crime was. So I'll talk about that. She was here for a life sentence, which gives you an idea of what she did. So there's not really too much. She was only 25 when she came in, but I can talk a little bit more about that. So sources I used, Idaho Daily Statesman articles, a ton of those on her, Ancestry.com and FamilySearch.com. Both of those are very useful in determining her family and her heritage and things like that. Of course, her inmate file. And then there is a woman by the name of Paula Huff Bryant who wrote this kind of book, kind of just a narrative, basically,
Yeah, it's kind
of
of a
Josie's life.
manuscript
Yeah,
for-
she
hopefully it'll be
she
a
got in
book soon.
contact with you, correct? Yeah.
yeah.
Overall, it is super well researched. I really actually had to do very little extra searching on my own because she took all the trial transcripts, all the newspaper articles. She did an excellent job. There's small errors here and there, typos and things like that. But if it's just an original, a very first copy, those are things that'll be ironed out. So I want to say thank you so much to her if she's listening, because your book was immensely helpful. So we'll just jump right in. So Josie was born Joan Josephine Melinda Lawrence on October 8th, 1871 in Uinta, Utah. She was one of 5 kids. She had an older sister, an older brother, and 2 younger sisters.
All these big families.
I know. This was 1870s,
Yeah,
so that's pretty typical, especially in Utah. Uinta is in northern Utah, and it was a railroad town around the time of her birth, but it's like very typical Old West railroad town, saloons, tent towns, billiard halls, prostitution, gambling, all that good stuff. They were there. They were a farming family. The kids didn't really get a lot of education. Some of them may have been able to read and write, but not too much higher than really like a 3rd or 4th grade level. They moved to Malad, Idaho, somewhere between 1880 and 1900. And the reason that we don't know why we don't have a time for that is because in the 1880 census, they're in Uinta. In the 1900 census, they're in Idaho. And in between is the 1890 census, which in 1921, there was a giant fire in Washington, D.C., which burned almost the entirety of that entire census. So all those years are lost. So we don't know if they were still in Utah in 1890, if they'd moved to Idaho by then.
That's a fun fact.
I know. It is so frustrating,
Yeah.
especially for these early inmates who sometimes
geez.
the only way you can trace where they're at is because of these censuses, and sometimes they're the thing you need to know the most is smack dab in that 1890.
I wonder how many listeners who have been trying to do their ancestry are like, I know.
Yes, we
I
know
hate
this.
that.
Yeah,
1890.
it is the
Why?
worst. It sucks. So in 1900, when they're in Idaho, the Lawrence family become acquainted with John Kensler. He owns a large ranch in Elmore County, which he gained through the Homestead Act, which, for those of you who don't know, was put out by Lincoln. Basically gave away tons. I think it started at 280 and ended up at 640. I think ton of acreage. Basically, all you had to do was live on the land for 6 years, and it was yours. That was it. So he got this large ranch in Elmore County. The relationship between Kensler and the overall family isn't known. What we do know is that in 1886, Josie marries John, and they settle in King Hill, which is about 5 miles outside of Glens Ferry, on his ranch. Josie was 14 years old when she got married. What? John was 38 or 39, literally the same age as her mother.
I feel like this is going to cause some issues in their future.
Well, I don't like it. Yeah. Just in general, I'm uncomfortable. So just a little bit about John. He was born in Ohio around 1844. He served in the Civil War in the Iowa Infantry Regiment. He was actually a prisoner of war as well.
Wow. Okay.
He likely operated the King Hill Stagecoach Station beginning in the 1870s, so around when Josie was born. And then again, with that Homestead Act, he started ranching. Josie and John had 2 children. Myrtle, who was born in July 1887. Josie was only about 16 when she gave birth, which is just too young. Wow. And Albert John, who was born November 1891. Josie was about 20.
Okay.
So based on most accounts, the couple were likely fairly wealthy. And then in the mid-1890s, they were wealthy enough that they hired Alfred Rosencrans Friel. He was from Glens Ferry. They hired him to help out around the ranch. John and Alfred mostly raised livestock. Alfred was Josie's age and kind of the only person within miles who is Josie's own age. So they developed a friendship and then probably a romance. There's not a lot of details that are left to confirm that this is true, but as you'll find out, this is a rumor that spreads around the town pretty easily, pretty quickly. Yeah. So all of this romance, all of the age difference, everything comes to a head on October 17th, 1896. Now, this is reported differently in some newspapers. Both Josie and Alfred give versions of events, and they're pretty similar to this. So I think we're all fairly certain this is what happened in the events leading up to this. So John and Alfred drive a team of horses to Glens Ferry, and while they're driving, John and Alfred start talking, and John gets really excited because he says he's going to sell the ranch, and he thinks he can get a pretty good profit on it, so he's pretty excited about that. So supposedly, John and Alfred go into town, they get drunk on some whiskey. They're drunk when they get home. Josie's coming in from milking some cows. She's got a bucket of milk in her hand. She says, "Listen, supper's ready, just come inside." So they come in. They're sitting down to dinner, and John tells Josie that he, quote, bargained to sell the land today. And Josie looks at him and she says, "I will not sign the deed."
Wow. Wait, he gambled?
No.
Or
I
just-
think he bargained.
just
He
seeing-
created a deal. He made a
Okay.
deal that said I'll take this much money for the land and then it's yours.
Oh my gosh.
I think. So she says, "I will not sign the deed." She doesn't want to leave. And he says, "That's the way you always thwart me," John says, and then he slaps her across the face.
Ooh.
And according to Alfred, he hit her pretty hard where she hit the wall.
Wow.
So she just looks at him and she says, "John, that is the last time that you'll strike me."
So this was not the first time,
No,
probably.
no,
Wow.
probably not.
Wow.
So after dinner, John and Alfred go out to the porch and they drink more whiskey. Eventually, Josie persuades John to come to bed. And this is the last night that John Kensler is seen alive. So October 18th, 1896, the next day. So there's a lot of intricacies that kind of go on. And so hopefully this all makes sense because I kind of cut some of the stuff out.
Yeah.
So they've got neighbors, the people on the neighboring ranch. There's an irrigation ditch that it splits into two, I think. And so the gate has to be closed in order for one ditch to be full, one irrigation ditch to be full. So one ditch goes through this Kensler property, the other goes through the Canfield property.
Okay.
So only one gate is ever open at a time so they kind of work out when they're going to irrigate their crops and stuff like that. So the Canfields notice they had shut their gate. So all of the water should have been flowing on the Kensler's land. And they notice on October 18th that their ditch is full of water, and they think that's kind of weird. So they start walking toward the gate, and they find horses, and the horses have their harnesses all tangled up in the wagon wheels. So they recognize that these are John's horses. So they untangle the horses, and then they take them back to Josie and say, hey, these are John's horses. Do you know what they were doing out by our ditch? And she says, oh, well, he left last night. He must have left last night with the horses and gone into town. I haven't seen him since then. So they're like, well, I don't know where he is. Do you want to see if we can, maybe find him? So they go back. They're kind of looking around. The spot where the wagon and the horses were found, where was John's coat and pipe. But the interesting thing is there are no footprints leading anywhere from the wagon. They walk down a little bit more. They find some footprints along a different part of the ditch. But again, it's nowhere near the wagon. So it's not like he hopped out and then kept walking. They're not really sure what that's about. They end up, the two men, the Canfields end up coming upon Alfred, and he says the same story. Yeah, John left last night. He took the horses. I haven't seen him since. So then he says, okay, well, I'll walk into Glens Ferry. We'll get a search party going. And while they're with the search party, Alfred keeps steering them towards the Snake River. He keeps saying, he probably drowned. Let's go search the Snake River. And they try to keep going back to the farm, and he keeps being like, I don't think anything happened over there. It's got to be the Snake River.
Interesting.
So they end up, this obviously is kind of making people suspicious. Like, why don't you want us to check this land?
Don't you care about this guy? Why aren't we searching? Yeah.
And especially since there are lots of rumors about Josie and about her reputation, people are starting to be like, did Alfred and Josie do this? They dredge the Snake River. They dynamite it in the hopes that by dynamiting it, his body will float to the surface, which I didn't know that was a plan that you could do, but obviously nothing comes of it. So it's learned that Alfred had bought a large amount of strychnine before John's death. So that immediately makes him and Josie number one suspects. They're immediately arrested for murder by poisoning.
Any idea why he would have purchased strychnine?
I mean, I don't know if it's true that they meant to kill him. Then maybe they meant to do it by poisoning.
But what would be any reason to have it other than to poison somebody? Is it for insecticide? It
might be. I wish I knew more about farming. For someone who's lived in Idaho her whole life, I know very little about the uses.
Obviously, I'm asking you. I have no idea why you have strychnine other than to poison somebody.
It's got to have some. People wouldn't sell it unless there was some. Maybe it's like it's got to be an insecticide. I would imagine.
Yeah, something.
And if you dilute it, then it's less enough that if you eat the crops, then you're fine. I don't know. I should have looked that up. I didn't even think about it. I was very like in the Lida mindset still, where it's like, oh, she bought flypaper and that's like normal.
Right.
Oh, but she bought a lot of it. So they are arrested for murder by poisoning. They don't have a body. So the police are really confounded by this. So all of that happens in October. In late December, constables from Glens Ferry and from Soldier, Idaho, they decide they really have to get to the bottom of this. So they decide that they are going to, they end up, the irrigation ditches aren't going to have any water in them in late December, I would imagine. So they are going to prod like every inch of the Kensler irrigation ditch just because there were the footprints around and the wagon was there. And so they take a 6-foot steel rod and the end has a barbed point on it. And so they go through and they basically just like poke it into the sides of the ditch and just comb every inch of it. Wow. Within 60 feet of Josie's front door, their prod goes into the dirt and sticks into something. And it's something that they haven't felt before. And they pull it out and the barb has got a piece of cloth on the end of it. So they dig, they find the body of John wrapped in a quilt. He's dressed only in his underwear. His outer clothes are underneath his body, and I think it was like 5 or 6 feet under the ground. So this was something that took a bit of time to get him in there. Wow. So here's what they find, and this is a little graphic. So there's a small hole above his right ear. The left side of his skull is totally crushed.
Oh.
It showed evidence of hard blows by heavy blunt instrument. The only bone intact in his face is his left jaw. Everything else is completely smashed. They also find wrapped in this actually it's at a different part of the property, but still not that far from either the front door or basically what was John's grave. They find a canvas sheet covered in blood and brain matter. Then they go inside the house. They find a bullet hole in the wall covered by wallpaper, and there was a hole actually in the headboard of the bed that they had carved to make it look like it was just like a knot in the wood. Like it was really covered up. And I don't go into that a ton, but I thought that was kind of interesting. So understandably, the murder by poison is no longer valid. They're now held on a new first-degree murder charge.
Jeez.
So April 29th, 1897, both Josie and Alfred plead not guilty. They have 30 witnesses come from Glens Ferry to Mountain Home. Mountain Home is where the trials are. So I think it's like 30 miles, which back then is not easy. These are huge trials. Newspapers from Boise to Salt Lake to places in Montana to even New York cover parts of this trial. Like this is like the original trial of the century in Idaho before Lida's, I'd even say.
Yeah.
So Alfred's trial starts on April 30th. Josie herself kind of comes as a witness, and she said Alfred was the one who'd killed John, but she had buried the bloody canvas because Alfred had told her to. Myrtle, Josie's daughter, even gets up on the state's behalf. And she basically just says that like she and her brother were sleeping in the same bed, and she heard a noise. So she woke up and she went outside, and her mom was outside behind this haystack, and her mom came up and said, "What's the matter? What are you doing?" And she was like, "I just heard a noise." And she said it sounded like a gunshot, but she was sort of led by the lawyers to understand that was that sound. And her mom said, "Okay, we'll go back to bed," and like got her back to bed. And then she said that she looked up out the window and saw her mom go behind the haystack again. Like that was essentially her testimony. But
That's
she
interesting
testified.
that she took the stand.
Yeah, and I
against her
think
own
she
mom.
was this is just against Alfred.
Oh,
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So she would have been about 9 or 10. I think she was about 9 when she did this.
Wow.
And then the senior deputy sheriff, R.A. Easley, said that Alfred told him that he actually confessed in the jail that he didn't have anything to do with the murder. It was all Josie. And Josie was the one who came up in the middle of the night and woke him up and said, like, "I killed my husband. I need your help." And he was like, "I don't want to have anything to do with this." And she was like, "You're going to help me or I'm going to kill you."
Yeah. Oh my God.
So the jury deliberates for 6 hours. They give their verdict at 2:45 a.m. They find him guilty of murder in the first degree, and he is given the death penalty. So he is freaking out, understandably. So Josie's trial begins May 7th, 1897. They actually use a lot of the same witnesses, including her own daughter. Again, they all give very similar testimony because this is basically one and the same crime. Mrs. Canfield, who again is the neighbor who owns that other half of the irrigation ditch, she claims that Josie told her that she would be the sole owner of the Kensler Ranch in 6 months. But Josie says, like, "I never said that. I don't know why she said I said that. I would never have ever said that." Alfred also supposedly said to another Canfield, "I'll be the owner of the ranch and the woman in 6 months. She loves me." So there's that. But again, this testimony is only from the Canfields, who basically were the ones who sort of discovered that John was missing in the first place.
Yeah. They're lucky that, Hal and Josie didn't attack them.
Right,
Like, wow,
right.
that is...
Yeah. So again, both of those testimonies were said in both trials. So then the district attorney reads a letter that Josie had written to Alfred while Alfred was in jail. It included pet names like Darling and Pet, and she signed it Baby. So obviously this idea that they're lovers is like, I don't write that to my hired hands, but maybe I'm doing it wrong. I don't know. So the jury ends up deliberating for 3 hours. They find her guilty of murder in the second degree. And people actually really criticize this because I think people really believe that Josie is much more guilty than Alfred is.
Yeah.
And so they're saying, well, if Alfred got first degree, then why in the world is she getting second degree? And like you have mentioned, a lot of it, I think, had to do with her gender. Yeah. The lawyers beforehand said, please don't let the fact that she's a woman, like, change your verdict or change the penalty. Like, if she did the same thing, she deserves the same sentence. But she got murder in the second degree instead. So during sentencing, Alfred's lawyer claims that there were serious flaws in both trials. They both pled. So they end up, I think it had something to do with like the fact that it was in Mountain Home, but technically they don't even know if the crime happened in Elmore County. So technically that wasn't a right place. So there were kind of these excuses that they give. The judge ends up ruling in their favor. So they get new trials. Both again plead not guilty. Both were found guilty of murder in the second degree and given life in prison. So Alfred, his sentence is changed. His jury was out for 24 hours trying to figure out if it was first or second degree.
I thought 4
Yeah.
hours was painful. 24
hours. Yeah.
That, I mean, condemning someone like this, like that, it's hard.
Right.
That's part of the whole process. And wow.
So 24 hours, he gets murder in the second degree, so he comes in for life. Wow. Both him and Josie come in for life. So Josie enters the prison on May 28th, 1897. She was the third ever female inmate at the Idaho State Penitentiary. She's given a cell in the 1890 cell house. She's given a little bit of extra stuff because she's a woman. She also is 7 months pregnant when she comes into the prison. So she's given like extra pillows and extra blankets, and the warden says like, we've given her, really nice accommodation. So hopefully, she's okay with that. So a matron, who again is just the warden's wife, is hired to kind of attend her through her birth. So Josie gives birth to a baby girl who she names Gladys on July 15th, 1897. Wow. She was the first baby born in prison, I guess not in prison, but like while her mom is incarcerated. She's not the last by any means, obviously.
And was it like in the 1890 cell house, or did they take her to the hospital?
It doesn't say. I would assume, I would hope they would take her to the hospital, but there may have been, given what comes next, it's possible that it was actually in the prison and the matron came in and the prison physician came in. So Gladys is sent to live with Josie's sister and is raised actually with Myrtle, who's her older sister by about 10 years. So according to Josie family lore, Gladys has a darker complexion than Myrtle or Albert, which lends credence to the fact that Gladys may be Alfred's daughter rather than John. So that's kind of, that was included in this book that Paula wrote, which is not something you're not going to find, in records like that. So obviously
is
there's
there
not
an official birth certificate or anything.
Not that I found.
Okay.
And I don't know if they didn't keep it because she was in prison.
Right. Yeah.
Because if it was just the prison physician, I don't know if they have to abide by the same rules.
Absolutely.
The prison way it works in here, especially in these early years, I don't fully understand.
Yeah, and this is also,
because they didn't even
turn
keep
of the century,
like gender,
right?
The gender of inmates until like the 1900s or something, right? So, so prison politics is just a little bit different. So there wasn't one that I could find. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but just not one that I could find. So while in prison, Josie works at the warden's house. She does domestic chores for him and his family. She did, quote, fine needlework. And I think that's mostly because there just wasn't much else for her to do. Yeah. She made friends with some other female inmates, especially Ida Laerty. She was a 16-year-old who came in. She ended up serving with 12 other women during her time in the penitentiary. Now, here's the big thing that Josie is best known for, and this is what's going to take up most of our time, I think. So in 1902, there's a Boise attorney. His name is H.W. Dunton, and he starts to prepare Josie's pardon application because he notes that she had really good behavior, and mostly that's really the reason why she should be released early. It stuns him then when Josie admits to him that she is 3 months pregnant, and that pregnancy, that she got pregnant while she was incarcerated.
This is like a Jerry Springer episode. Wow.
He wished there was so much drama.
Yeah.
So Dunton goes to the prison physician. His name is Jesse K. Dubois, and he asks him to do a physical examination of Josie to make sure that this is true. So Dubois visits her, but he says he didn't do a physical exam because he just simply doesn't believe that she's pregnant. He keeps saying it's impossible for her to have been pregnant. She's lying. The warden, C.E. Arney, just straight up's like, she's lying. This couldn't have happened. She's not pregnant. Dubois keeps saying, I'm not going to do a physical exam on her because it's just not possible. So Dunton, who's frustrated because he knows that he needs this information in order to try to get her a pardon, he goes over Dubois's head. He goes to the Attorney General, I think his name's Frank Martin, and he asks him to look into the matter. Almost every official refuses to give Josie a physical exam, again saying she's lying, it's not possible. So then her appeal to the Board of Pardons is rejected. So then word gets back to A.G. Martin that Josie has mysteriously gotten ill. So he confronts her about it, and she says that the warden and the prison physician forced me to have an abortion. And so they talk a little bit, and he says, will you sign an affidavit if I get this down on paper? And she says, yes, I will. And so he does that. She signs it. H.W. Dunton writes his own affidavit, again, claiming the same thing, that the warden and the physician forced her to have an abortion. So arrest warrants are issued for Warden Arney and Dr. Dubois for committing an abortion, which is a felony in the fairly new state of Idaho. Warden Arney continues to go into the newspapers, keeps saying she's lying. This is not true. It's impossible for her to get pregnant in the prison. We have very secure methods. This is impossible.
Conjugal visits were never allowed at this prison site. So, I mean,
her husband is dead.
Exactly.
And her lover is in prison with her.
So
there's no way.
Yeah.
No way that there is anyone to be giving her conjugal visits. Anyway. So the main testimony against Arney and Dubois comes from Charles D. Chin, who is a turnkey guard. He escorted Dr. Dubois to Josie's cell on the evening of July 22nd, 1902, which is the date that both he and Josie claim that this abortion happened. So a week before the visit, which is July 15th, incidentally, it was Gladys's 5th birthday. So Josie's been in for about 5 years. Dr. Dubois comes to visit Josie because she'd been feeling ill for several days. A few days later, she's called into the warden's office, so Chin escorts her to that visit, but he doesn't know what conversation goes on in there. A few days after that, Chin, he took Josie a small pasteboard box that he said must have had medicine in it, because sometimes inmates will get medicine and he has to take it to them. But he says he didn't see the contents of it, and he knew there was writing on it, but he couldn't remember what it said. After he brings the medicine, Chin claims that Josie's illness got worse, and she starts complaining of back and side pains until Dr. Dubois visits for a second time. And when he exits this time, or when he comes in this time, he's got a box of instruments. And so Chin sees these instruments. He doesn't know what they're for, but he says at this time, this is when the miscarriage happened. So Chin says he saw the birth himself. He says, quote, Mrs. Kensler told the doctor that she had a miscarriage. The doctor asked her where it was, and she told him on the bed. The doctor went to the bed and got it and laid it on the table and looked at it. And then there's a question, and I think it's the lawyer. He says, well, what did the doctor say? And Chin says, he said, it is all right. Everything is all right. What did the doctor do then? He wrapped it up and took it away with him. Was there any more conversation with the lady? Was the last question. And he says, no, not that I know of. So, so then he also claims that Chin also claims that he was part of a meeting where Warden Arney was told of Josie's miscarriage. And this is what he says about this meeting. He says, he being Arney, stated to me that if the scandal got out, it would kill him politically. And so Chin stuck by the story every time he was asked about it afterwards, that this is the series of events that went down. All officials claimed that Josie was in a, quote, delicate condition, and that prisoner Alfred Roberts was responsible. So Alfred Roberts is a guy she wasn't associated with when she came in. Alfred Roberts, number 770, he was in for passing a fictitious check. That's kind of all the details they have on that. They don't really say why they would have been in contact with one another. As I'll talk about here in a few minutes, there were other inmates that she was much closer to. So I don't know why they're trying to peg it on him. But Alfred Roberts is the original sort of scapegoat for this pregnancy.
Interesting. I wonder if he had a trustee job, like taking trash out or cleaning the facility or something in there. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. He does look very similar to the rest of the men who were involved, and
she had a type.
She certainly had a type. Yeah. All right. So when Josie gets on the stand during this trial, she completely contradicts her original affidavit. When she's asked if she was pregnant, she says, "Not since I've been in the penitentiary," which is technically a lie in at least one way,
Yeah,
because she was pregnant
had
for
a
2
baby.
months
Yeah.
while she was in prison. So that kind of is like red flag number 1.
Interesting.
So then she states that she'd been feeling poorly, with muscular pains in her back and side, which is what Chin said, and that Dr. Dubois had visited. He'd given her some pills, but the pills caused her to feel better after 3 or 4 days, which again is in direct contradiction to Chin's statement, because what Chin said is that she was super sick. The doctor came to visit her, gave her medicine. She got worse. And then after the miscarriage is when she got better. So she sort of throws out all of this stuff that Chin said.
Yeah.
So because of Josie's contradicting testimony, the case against Warden C.E. Arney is just dismissed due to lack of evidence. But a day later, the same judge charged Dr. Dubois with causing an abortion on Josie. So he says, since you're the one who prescribed the medicine, you're the one who's responsible for this. So the new trial is postponed until November 1902. But before the trial, there's a bombshell that's dropped. There's a convict who is in with Josie. His name is William Howard Thomas.
Oh, he's my favorite.
He's so good. He says that during their shared incarceration, he and Josie had become romantically involved with each other. I don't know. Again, I wish I understood how this was possible. Josie was apparently quite charismatic, quite a flirt, quite the looker for her day. I wouldn't say she's a looker for our day, but she's got a head of like curly, I imagine her hair is red, but I think it's brown. Unless she's got these dark hazel eyes, so she's probably charismatic and charming and all those things. So he says they're romantically involved, and he is planning to testify against Dubois because he knows some stuff.
Yeah.
Dubois actually never comes to trial. A county attorney deduced that Dubois himself had not administered the medicine. Josie's the one who took the medicine. He had really only cared for Josie after the medicine made her sick. So he walks away a free man. So the case is closed for a few months until there's a new elected governor. His name is John T. Morrison, and he is hardly in office for like a month when he reopens this investigation. Yeah. Now, again, there's a lot of complication to this, and I'm going to basically cover most of it with like one line, because it kind of technically all interweaves, but it didn't feel like it had a lot to do with Josie. So it basically comes out during this investigation that William Howard Thomas, who officials knew Josie favored, was offered good time if he convinced Josie to sign a second affidavit, which contradicted her first. There's another convict his name was J.P. Carlin. He was a janitor in that building. He states that one night after Josie's illness, he, quote, carried away a bucket with something covered in blood.
Oh.
So there's the deputy warden, his name is James Donnelly. He comes up to Carlin supposedly after this event, and he pressures him to change his story. And this is what Carlin says. He says, quote, I did not think it was any of his business, so I put him off by saying I knew very little or something like that. He, being Donnelly, replied, well, you don't want to know anything about it. So according to Carlin, Donnelly is super covering something up.
Yeah.
So they put together this Idaho Legislative Committee to look into this. They're the ones who are leading this investigation. So they get Josie up in front of this committee, and she admits that it was actually a prison official that had gotten her pregnant.
No.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a committee member asks, do you mind giving his name? And Josie said, I would rather not unless I have to. And she just starts crying, just completely breaks down. She further admits that whoever this official was, pestered her for sexual favors for 2.5 years. Oh. And that once she gave in, he visited her cell often. Now, I want to believe her because, it would make sense. Prison officials in power, this woman who's all alone in this prison, clearly vulnerable, clearly she has this reputation. I feel like he knows he can get away with it.
Yeah, that pressure.
Yeah. And so I want to believe her, but at the same time, she is a little manipulative. She is charming. This could have happened with anyone because I think she had a little bit more free reign than she probably should have.
Yeah, yeah. Or access to the men who are also celled in the same cell house that she is in, just in a little separate section.
Well, and the fact that that Howard Thomas, once the warden tells him that he'll get good time, he straight up goes to her cell, visits her in her cell.
Yeah, yeah.
So, which means that probably isn't the first time that that's happened.
Yes.
So
and you talk about him after, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. 'Cause
Yeah.
we'll have to cover him because he's got a fascinating
He does.
story.
He
And
absolutely
actually,
does.
I believe, left a mark in the side of Two House.
Oh.
WHT carved into
Cool.
the side of it. So I'll talk about that in
Yeah.
another episode.
So, but he's on her side the whole time. He's willing to back her up, and he also says like, yes, it was a prison official. So I think I believe her story because I think it's much more plausible for a prison official to have done it. But it's what I'm saying is it's not implausible for this to have been a consensual thing.
Yeah.
So then when this committee asks her why she won't give up the name of this person who did it, she just won't say why. She won't say. And then they ask her if anything was done about the guard or the prison official. She says, well, I did tell the warden that this happened. And they said, well, what happened to him? And she replied, well, he was not discharged. Which I hate that this is still happening in 2019.
Right.
This
yeah.
was 100 and
Jeez.
many years ago because
Yeah.
I can't do math.
17. Yeah. Wow.
And it's like deeply disappointing. So supposedly, this is according to Josie, the conversation that Josie had with the warden before the miscarriage happened, which Chin had said, like, I took her to the meeting. I don't know what was said in it. She says it was a discussion with Arnie and with the deputy warden, Donnelly, that again says, if you sign the second affidavit and you get up on the stand and you contradict this first affidavit, then you'll definitely be pardoned. Do you want to guess if she got pardoned?
Did she?
She did not.
No.
No one is surprised by this. Nothing happens, pretty much. Like, she remains in prison. Arnie, he's not forced to resign because of this. It actually comes out during this sort of combined investigation that he takes convict labor and he uses it for his own personal gain out at his brother's farm.
Yeah.
And so this whole thing, this is what I mean by it's really kind of tangled up in this Josie investigation, but it doesn't have a lot to do with Josie. It has more to do with the fact that he was taking these convict laborers, taking them out to his brother's farm and making them work there all day long. And Chin gives a lot of testimony about that as well. So he's resigned because of that, not necessarily because of Josie. Dubois is, again, he's a free man. He's totally allowed to continue practicing medicine. What did change was the need for a separate women's facility. So by 1902, Idaho is actually the only state without a separate women's ward, without a matron to take care of the ladies. And Ida Laerty has a lot to do with this as well, but I can talk about her later. The male convicts, they start quarrying rock. They build a wall around the warden's old house because they build this newer one. It's much bigger. It's much nicer. And so they end up kind of shacking the ladies up. There's not, I think, let's see, at least 4 other female inmates would have been transferred over to that new building with Josie. So they all move in 1905.
And it was just a tiny little shack
Right.
that was the warden's house
Yeah.
that they built the wall around. Yeah.
Yeah, it just looks like sort of one of those houses that you'd find on like any normal like rural farm. Like we've got pictures of it, someone like sitting on the porch. It's just a little guy. I think there's like a shack out back behind it. I don't know what was in that shack, but like the picture that we have of the women's
Might be the
ward
outhouse or something.
Yeah, that outhouse, they strung the laundry in between the house and the shack.
Yeah.
So that's where they lived. And then as I talk about a little bit in the very first episode, in 1920 is when that whole thing is built. But she just lives in the house because in December 1908, Josie's sentence is commuted and then she's released a year later on December 1st, 1909. She served 12 and a half years at the Idaho State Penitentiary for that crime and having to live through that abortion.
Wow. Jeez. And do you know how long Al served? Al Friel?
I don't. I should have looked that up. Also, I can't remember.
Sorry,
now.
that was a-
No. Like,
Yeah.
see, you're so good at thinking about that extra stuff. I literally am just like Josie. I don't care about anyone else.
Understandable.
Yeah. So she actually remains in Boise. The 1910 census has her living in Boise with her daughters, Myrtle and Gladys.
Oh, so
she
they're
gets to be
reunited.
she gets
Yeah.
to be a mom. This is probably the first time Gladys has ever seen her mom.
Jeez.
I wonder if they visited. I don't really know.
Yeah,
They don't talk about it, but they didn't have visitors in the same way that prisoners get to have visitors today,
Yeah, they
especially
kind
in
of
those early days.
massed them all together in the warden's office, and, which
Which
if
is
you've
not
been to the
very
old
big.
pen, yeah, it is a
It's
tiny
small,
room.
small.
No privacy or anything.
Yeah, so because I think her daughters had lived with her sister, and then her one son, I should say, was off. I don't know where he was. I couldn't find him in the census, but I think Paula might have, and I just skipped over it. I think he may have been on a farm with an uncle or one of John's
that would make sense.
family.
Yeah, he's got a family history.
Yeah.
Yes.
So 2 years later, after she's released under the name Joan Kensler, she marries a man named Andrew Ketchum in Boise. Now, he's older than her, not quite as much as John was, but he is still older. Apparently, they got married on a Thursday, and by the Sunday, she is visiting William Howard Thomas in prison.
Oh.
And she visits him so often that the warden basically has to forbid William from having any visitors.
And William Thomas is like this handsome bad boy guy from Cornwall, England.
Listen,
He's like
he is not bad
British
looking.
accent.
Like,
So it's
if their mugshots, like, again, they all look really similar, but he's definitely the best looking of Alfred Friel, of Alfred Roberts. Okay, so Andrew Ketchum and Josie end up making in the newspaper again when Andrew is arrested for assault with a weapon with intent to commit murder, and this is against Albert, Josie's son. Now, Albert claims that Andrew was physically violent toward his mother, and Albert was just trying to protect her. So he sort of that Andrew ends up pushing Albert out of the way, draws a gun on Albert, and Albert ends up, I think, falling or being pushed out of the way, and so luckily he is not shot. But basically, some testimony claims that if that hadn't happened, Albert would probably be dead. And Josie herself claims that it was just a familial misunderstanding, and that a couple months later the family are on all good terms again. However, William is released from prison, and Josie says, "Peace.
Bye,
I'm
Ketchum."
out. I am out." So she leaves a note, and this is what the note says. It says, quote, "Goodbye. I am going away. Be good to the children and let them have what is in the house. You don't need it, nor do I. Don't blame anyone for my going. I have took my gun, so don't worry over it." And then she signs it Joan. And there's some theories right when she first disappears. And one of the theories is that she ran away and committed suicide. And Andrew sort of knows exactly why. Like, he's just like, I think she ran off with that Thomas character. You know, he isn't really super concerned with catching her again, because I think he knows that their marriage isn't super great, and so he just sort of lets her go. So she ends up filing for divorce. She claims inhuman treatment and cruelty against him. They are divorced in November 1913. That same month, Josie and William Howard Thomas marry, and then their son, William Edward Thomas, is born on August 1st, 1914. She was 43.
Wow.
So there is 27 years between her first birth and her third,
That's
or
incredible.
fourth, I should say, between her first and her last. She's 43. That's like today in 2019. That's like
This is unsafe to do this.
Yeah.
This is what?
This is
1914.
1914. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So William ends up sadly dying on October 27th, 1918 in Salt Lake City as a result of the influenza pandemic, or the Spanish flu, following World War I. She then briefly lives with Albert and Edward, her two sons, in Nebraska before she settles in Bozeman, Montana, where she died on August 17th, 1938 at the age of 66. Wow. She died of apoplexy, or what is today called cerebral hemorrhage. So
Great work,
that
Skye.
is Josie.
That story, I've
It's
been wanting to
fascinating.
condense it into something, so this was wonderful. Nicely
I mean,
done.
I don't know if I took 2 hours. That felt like a long time.
45 minutes.
Really?
Yeah, that's great.
Awesome.
Yeah, it would have taken me 2 hours.
I like, yeah, and like I said, I really feel like Josie, I don't feel like is necessarily a bad character, and maybe it's because she basically accuses this prison official of rape, and no person should ever have to go through that.
Even with her husband, the abuse that she was receiving,
yes.
She is responding to these things.
Yeah. And I didn't include it in my outline, but she does say during one of the trials that John Kensler was abusive to her. He was pretty drunk all the time. Yeah. And especially when he got drunk is when he got more abusive. And so it is understandable. I don't know. I just really feel for her. I think she's a really interesting character. She's very multidimensional. She isn't this, like, she killed her husband because she was a flirt. And I think that's sort of the reputation that she tends to get. And I don't think that's the case. I think she was doing what she felt she had to do to protect her family, and it was a little unfortunate that she did it with this guy who was probably her lover, but at the same time, she wouldn't have been like physically strong enough on her own to be able to dispose of the body and things like that. So if Alfred hadn't come along, she probably would have just lived out her life.
Lived the abuse, yeah.
I mean, granted, by the time
that
this
is
happened,
crazy.
he would have been in his 50s, so she may not have had to wait too much longer, but that's even 10, 20 years is too long to have to live in an abusive relationship. And and like I said, this abortion and rape that she likely went through, I mean, the abortion I think is fairly certain is what happened.
Yeah.
Because she rescinds her second affidavit and says like, yes, I was pregnant, and I hope much more that it was a consensual thing, but and the abortion thing is just not okay, and unfortunately, this is an issue still.
Right.
In 2019, we just had that Georgia bill pass, and Alabama I think is trying to pass something very similar. And that's really difficult. And, we're not here to get into the politics of it,
Right.
but this is still an issue. However many, again, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I know.
117 years.
117 years later,
Yeah,
this is something that is still an issue.
I think, I don't know if
everyday
it's
women.
something that'll go
Yeah,
away. It's,
This is probably one of the few laws that have consistently remained controversial.
Absolutely.
And so I could have also gotten into the birth control methods and the abortion methods, but I didn't feel that was appropriate. But Paula does actually. So if that book is ever published, she does a pretty good job at talking about the different birth control methods and how dangerous abortion was, the Comstock laws that come out and really regulate birth control in women's bodies. So she does a really nice job of that.
And we'll probably cover one of these stories of someone who's in for abortion and where the individual dies and or has really terrible medical complications.
And she served with the very first man who was arrested for performing an abortion. And I can't remember his name now, but again, Paula does a great job of digging into his story as well. And I mean, we've got one woman who is in for abortion, Lena Pink Proud, and her story is quite interesting. And then I'd love to do one on oh goodness, what's his name? I did that bio on him for Faces, and I love him so much. What is his name?
I can see his
face also. And that the girl, they took her to have an abortion because they probably got her pregnant, and he was a real jerk about it. And then she ended up dying. And I just had a flash of his name and now it's gone. Anyway, I hope we do him.
If you come to the old pen, check out our Faces exhibit in the old trustee dorm. You'll see him there. He's a young, kind of dapper looking guy.
If I say his name in the middle of your story, it's because I just remembered it and I have to get it out.
Yes.
So.
Please like and follow our Facebook page, Old Idaho Penitentiary. There you can connect with us directly by joining the Behind Gray Walls podcast group.
If you like the podcast, please consider making a donation. You can do that by going to store.history.idaho.gov/donation. Any donation is appreciated, and it will go toward improving the quality of this podcast and enabling us to continue to bring you the stories that we love and we hope that you love too.
Well, my story.
All right, let's lighten things up a bit.
So mine, I am covering Mr. Sam Stevens, a.k.a. A.B. Mayer, a.k.a. Tom Robson, true name Harry Cohen, number 4156. Okay. And this is kind of hearkening back to the last episode with Patrick Murphy about spiritualism and the turn of the century. I mean, we've always had this, but this is kind of the heyday of the clairvoyance and the palm readers and seances and things like that.
Spiritualism is so fascinating to me.
I love it. Yeah.
And like that people, especially in like the Victorian era, were so obsessed with getting because photographs were brand new, and so trying to get photographic evidence of fairies and of these little supernatural things. Like, I love it.
Well, Sam Stevens is a 45-year-old man who uses his special skills as a clairvoyant and a mystic to help empty the bank accounts of several vulnerable individuals of southern Idaho in 1928 before skipping town. He considers himself a professor of this clairvoyant skill. He called himself Professor A.B. Meyer.
Okay, so is he like the professor in The Wizard of Oz where he says like Professor Marvel, where she's like, what about all the crown heads of Europe? And he's like, do you know any? Is this the kind of professor that he is?
I think so.
Yes.
He considers himself the world's greatest palmist and truth teller, mastermind of mediumship.
Let's just call him the Wizard of Oz, I
He is
suppose.
the wizard, yes. I mean, during this time, some of the things I pulled up from the Library of Congress, if you haven't, you should check out Library of Congress. They have Chronicling America, digital newspapers from across the country.
They're
for
awesome.
Decades,
Yep.
centuries,
Awesome.
yeah. So here's one of my favorite ones that I pulled out from 1898. It's clairvoyant Orrin Stevens, the original boy medium and greatest clairvoyant on earth, lifts the veil of the future and peers into the great mysterious and reads your life from the cradle to the grave like an open book. Gives name, dates, locates persons, lost or stolen property, gives advice on all business transactions. Come and see his reference from the businessmen in the city. He is visited daily by people of intelligence, and many of their successes are due to his spiritual advice. People are eating this up.
Of course.
And, of course, a lot of it comes with controversy. In 1906, this clever professor is police are searching for him, and his name also, Professor E.L. Mayer, which I don't know if it's Sam Stevens, a.k.a. A.B. Meyer, a.k.a. Tom Robson. I don't know, but this guy was being chased in San Francisco in 1906. 1919, there's another Mrs. Stevens, which we will get to in a moment.
Oh, my goodness.
Who leads this woman to marry a man. And,
Oh, boy.
yeah, and
Don't marry men.
based on a medium, a psychic telling you to. So the police ask her, did you go to this medium to have her pick out a husband? And she says, no, that's the mystery of all this, with what turned a faraway look in her clear eyes. When I met him and he wanted me to marry him, I couldn't help myself. So she marries this man, and he starts beating her and demanding money from her. And
Wait, so, okay, sorry. So she goes to this mystic, and
Yes.
she goes in for something else,
yeah,
whatever
just,
something
for her
else
fortune,
is.
Yeah.
But then this medium tells her, "Oh, you're going to marry this
you need
man.
to marry this man.
Like,
he's
by
Hawaiian.
name?
Yes.
He's Hawaiian.
He's this Hawaiian man.
Where
and
is this
actually, so this is in the Washington Times in D.C. And basically this clairvoyant says, you've got to marry this man. And so she does it because, the psychic knows. And this is kind of, I don't know. I wanted this to represent, this is how big these things got. Like people
totally.
ate every word of these
Yeah.
individuals. And so she marries this guy, and she doesn't even know if he's actually Hawaiian. She just said, yeah, how do you know that he's part Kanaka? He told me so, and he speaks with Hawaiian accent.
Oh, no.
So that was it. And so
Oh,
the judge,
no.
fortunately, allows them to annul the marriage and get
That
divorced.
poor
but,
girl.
Right. I mean, I've got article after article of all these clairvoyants who are saying, I will find you your love, and I will tell you, this one here says, I will also tell you the date of your marriage. And this is from 1922. So, I mean,
to be fair, I would eat that up.
and a lot of people do. I mean, there's still TV shows, Long Island Medium and things like that.
Yeah.
And my parents have gone to a psychic and
Sure.
and heard some pretty interesting things. I listened to the recording. I was like, yeah, that's pretty interesting. But it's hard to believe. I've heard some cold cases where a psychic has said you have to go to this remote spot and please search and search. They aren't there, and then some hiker stumbles across the body in that location, and you're like, that's really bizarre. How is that even possible?
I think psychics are just the serial killers themselves.
Controversial.
Just kidding.
So
If you're a psychic, please don't
no,
tell
yeah,
me the date of my death or something.
I would love to experience and witness something that was legitimately
Right.
but all too often,
Right.
there are con men, and Sam Stevens is one of those. He's born Harry Yankel Cohen in New York in 1881.
Yonkel.
And-
Is that what you just said?
Yes, Yancle. Harry
Oh,
Y.
okay.
Cohen.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was thinking Yonkel or something, and I was like, is that ethnic in some way? Is he from? Anyway, doesn't matter. Continue.
yeah.
We just
and
already
I-
hung up on his name.
Yes, I tried to, because of all of his different names, it was really hard to track down where he is from. Really, I went through his police records, and that was the best way to track down where he's been, where he went. Yeah, he's got these 4 names, and these are aliases, so we don't exactly know. I think that he married a woman named Angeline Coons in Alabama in August of 1915. And that is just because it was Harry Uncle Cohen marrying Angeline Coons. And I know that he has a wife and a daughter. Could not find their names anywhere either. So, I dug on this guy. But at some point in the early, mid-1920s, he has this daughter. His story kind of comes to Idaho in about 1927. He lived in Pocatello for about a year and a half, and he opened up this psychic business. He is, the champion, the world master of palmistry and all this stuff. And it seems like he came from Columbus, Georgia, and that's because he was arrested there July 27, 1927, under an investigation. But he's released, and there's no understanding, there's no write-up about what the investigation was, but I think we have an idea. So like most psychics and clairvoyants, he begins small. He just invites you in, free seminar, we'll discuss something, I'll look at your palm and tell your future maybe, and then we'll set up some dates, and maybe you can start paying me for...
Listen, folks, if there's free seminars, that's how cults start. Don't attend free seminars, especially if there's pizza.
Yes.
If there's pizza, normally go. But if it's a free seminar for anything and there's pizza, don't go.
Well, I took a little seminar here, and I have become a master of palmistry. So if I can look at your palms, Skye. Let's see. Okay.
I have a long...
Yeah. All of these lifelines here. So if you look at these lines, you've got a lot of potential that has not been used to your advantage yet. You're an independent thinker. I think that's pretty obvious. At times, you can be prone to doubting whether or not you've made the right choices in your life. Is that true?
It is true.
Wow. There have been times when social anxiety has been a problem for you.
Yeah.
You can be excessively critical of yourself.
Yeah.
I'm also getting the sense that you're the type of person who places a great value on being liked and admired. I don't know. This line right here, it's kind of hard to say, but that's
you're
sometimes.
To be clear, he's not pointing at one line in particular. He's literally waving his finger over my entire palm.
I am a palmist, okay? You aren't a perfect person, but you're, for the most part, you've made up for your weaknesses, I'd say.
Actually, I disagree. I am a perfect person.
Well, that's not what your palm says, so...
You're right. It's my palm at fault and not you.
So basically, these are the types of things that they say. Just like
the most
leading,
generic.
Very generic. Everybody, you breathe oxygen in copious amounts sometimes. Yeah.
What?
I can tell that you are physical and active. You currently have a brace on your right wrist. Is that from playing soccer and
breaking
it? Yeah.
How did you know that?
Is
it because of my palm?
It might be.
Is it because of the bruise on my wrist?
It might be because of the bruise. But, so this is how Sam kind of would begin it, and this is just how they often start. He starts bringing people in, and during a seance with this woman named Agnes Schwab of McCammon, Idaho, he offers to reveal the location of this hoard of robber's gold at the price of $400. So apparently, there is this treasure taken from this Salt Lake-bound stagecoach on the way from Montana goldfields in 1860. $40,000 worth of gold and jewelry were taken from this train in a holdup.
Wow. This
is true. I found this, and it was a true thing, and it was sometime between the 1860 1865 that this occurred, and the loot has never been found, never been accounted for. So for $400, Mrs. Schwab, I will tell you exactly where it's at. So she pays it up. He draws up a map and gives it to her. Next client comes in, man named Carl Cass. And Carl owns a trucking business. Mm-hmm. And Sam says that he could get Carl a contract with the Henry Ford Company to guarantee a return of at least $2,000 for these investments of trucking these items and things. So Stevens says that he's a representative of the Ford Company and claims that he had $1 million or more to his name.
So this isn't even about being clairvoyant. He's just straight up like, I can sell you these.
Deal.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's like each person, he's seeing what their weakness is.
Interesting.
And
yes,
collecting all this
classic con man.
Yes. Yeah. And then his last one, Miss H.D. Lyon Harris, alleges that she gave him $250 because he promised that he could get her daughter into the movies. Oh,
never believe that.
This
Hollywood
does not work. He said that he would get her a contract with this Hollywood producing company. And
Where
then he
was this
skips
in
town.
Salem, Oregon? And
So-
what year is this?
So this is in Pocatello, Idaho.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so this is like 1927 through 1929 that he's doing this. Finally, he skips town after collecting on this last $250 from Harris. And she goes to the police and says, this man conned me out of $250. I need to speak to him. You need to find him and arrest him. So police, put out a APB, and they finally find him. He's caught in Salem, Oregon.
That's where.
on
Sorry,
December
I'm reading
21st.
his notes upside down.
Oh,
and I
that's
shouldn't do that. That's why
December
I was like
21st,
Salem, Oregon.
1928. He's arrested and lodged in the Pocatello County in the county jail there.
Okay.
And after he's arrested, 15 to 20 people come to the police and the sheriff's office and say, this man. Complaints ranging from $25 to $1,200
Whoa.
for all these things that he said would happen for them, that they would find all these riches and all these different things. And then a letter comes in from Wisconsin saying that he is a con man and they are looking for him there. So he ends up sitting in this jail for a year and he's being questioned. He goes in front of the court. He's finally convicted, 2 counts of obtaining money under false pretenses, and he gets a sentence of no less than 5 years, no more than 15 years on February 18, 1929. And he doesn't enter the prison until January 5th, 1930, because they're trying to sort out all these complaints and this connection with Wisconsin. They never actually convict him in Wisconsin. I can never say that word, Wisconsin. They just drop charges because they're like, well, it's
too much.
Yeah.
So is he just in the Bannock County Jail then? Okay.
Yeah.
They didn't
So
just like
for the
let him
year.
go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he finally arrives at the prison on January 5th, 1930. And one of my favorite things on his intake papers, they ask all these different questions. And one of them is, do you regard him as a menace to society, as a habitual criminal, or a man who has made a mistake? And so the prosecuting attorney writes in the past, he certainly has been a menace. What he will be in the future, I would not attempt to predict. It just made me laugh so hard that
totally tongue in cheek of like, I don't know what's happening in the future, but he does. Like,
exactly.
That's so funny.
So his Bertillon sheet shows that he's 5'3". He's just this short little guy. He's 159 and a half pounds. His build very short and stout. Bridge, he's got a Roman Jewish bridge. His chin, double chin.
Oh,
Age 49. I mean, this is kind of a...
he's just a typical middle-aged man.
Yes, yeah. Nativity, New York City, so he's probably got an accent. Residence, Denver, Colorado. So his wife and daughter had moved to Denver while he was in jail. Occupation, fortune teller, complexion, dark. So he's got this kind of classic fortune teller look.
Funny.
I imagine he probably had some sort of headdress and,
a crystal ball.
Probably. I mean... That's part of the equipment, I feel like, at this time. So immediately after he arrives, he starts applying for parole.
Wow.
And the parole board is saying, he hasn't served long enough. I mean, but his wife sends letters, and she sends it to the governor of Idaho, to the prosecuting attorneys, to the warden, to the parole board, and she's talking about the heartache that his incarceration is causing them because she's sick, the daughter's sick, she's destitute, they don't own a house, they're living in Denver, and there's not a lot of work. This is during the Great Depression, too. This is 1930, so, like, all of these things are falling on their family. She writes, also, it has been learned that a strong political and personal grievance existed against him on account of his inability to satisfy a certain candidate who sought office at the time he was in Pocatello. So he was a candidate, somebody was running for office, came to the psychic, and... Sam probably was like, oh, yeah, you'll get elected. Just here, $200 in here, and we'll make sure the spirit world aligns with our world.
Right.
They did not get elected. And I tried to figure out who exactly it was, but I'm not sure who.
Too many politicians in Pocatello.
So his defense attorneys also write, and they, because they're getting letters from his wife as well. He writes, he was charged and convicted of the crime of obtaining money under false pretenses, but when considered in light of the fact that he was a fortune teller and those who went to see him, seeking his advice, assuring them of fabulous returns on their money, were as much to blame as he, it does not seem that the board may well consider favorably his petition. People possessed of ordinary intelligence, who go to fortune tellers do so knowing that they will be told visionary tales of hidden treasure, fabulous wealth, and great power, and they likewise know that there is no foundation in fact for such a statement. And to punish the fortune teller alone beyond the suffering already endured by Mr. Stevens hardly seems just. So he's saying, like, I mean, what he did is bad, but the people going to him
are partially to blame because they know.
Exactly. Yeah, they should know. They also revealed that while Sam was in the Pocatello jail for a year, he prevented a mass jailbreak. He was an informant. He was a rat.
Oh,
He
don't
snitched on
be
these
that.
people.
That's
Yes.
not good.
And not long after this letter arrives, a letter arrives from the county sheriff, who also says, you know, you should probably release this guy. It's a petty crime. And also, he was a rat. And I have hesitated about mentioning this matter to you because of the effect it will have, if known, upon Stevens in the penitentiary. And I trust that for his protection alone, you will keep the matter confidential among your membership. So he's serving time with the men he ratted out in that county jail while he sat there for a year. So they're saying, you should probably let this guy out. His case is brought up there July 1930. So, 7 months after he arrives, it's denied. So he gets to spend some more time in the prison. In September, he writes the board again, talking about how much of a heartache it is on his family and that his wife is consumptive, so she has tuberculosis. His daughter has rickets, which is weak and soft bones in children due to vitamin D deficiency. And then he has kidney and heart trouble from angina pectoris, which is basically when your heart muscle doesn't get enough blood, you have some blockages. And so he felt that he didn't have long to live, and he's saying, you got to release me so I can put a roof over my wife and my daughter's head. And he also ends with this postscript PS that says, I'm told my wife and daughter are starving. So it's this really heartbreaking letter to read, which is not uncommon in inmate files.
Yeah.
He applies for pardon again that October 1930. Again, it's denied. In May and June of 1931, District Judge of Idaho's 5th District in Pocatello, he writes a letter on his behalf, talking again about his wife and daughter. And he writes to the parole board. Sam writes to the parole board, I'm done with my former vocation and never again intend to follow the same. My family have suffered every known privation. She is unable now to cope with her situation, lack of employment, sickness. I ask mercy at your hand so I can go home and get a position and relieve their suffering. So this is the final thing. So the district judge writes on his behalf. He writes on his behalf. Finally, he's pardoned on July 11th, 1931.
Wow.
But he makes one more prediction. Well, a couple more here. He wrote to the warden that Governor C. Ben Ross would be reelected and would reappoint Warden Thomas to the post. And sure enough, that worked out. But he wrote, eternal vigilance is the keynote to success in any enterprise. You will be assailed a few times, but will surmount all obstacles and be here a long time. One of those obstacles was probably in December of 1932 when inmates R.E. Mounts and Looney Welling stole Warden Thomas's car and drove to California. So he predicted that, of course.
Of course.
He also said that he had predicted Governor Ross's victory, his first victory, and Lyda's escape, and he didn't tell anyone because he was afraid to reveal it for fear. You would think me silly. Governor Ross was
I
reelected
don't think they
in
would
32.
have thought him silly if they had prevented
all right.
Lyda's year-long escape. I
Right.
don't think they would have been upset by that. He probably would have gotten out.
Yeah.
He probably wouldn't have even had to been on parole or anything.
That's the
Or he was
problem
pardoned,
with being psychic, though. Like, no one is
It's-
going to believe
it's
you.
a
So you just got to
burden.
keep it to yourself.
It's a
Yeah.
burden.
So he's released. He goes back to his family. And what do you predict? Do you think he stayed out of trouble?
I mean, I'd like to think he did, but my guess is he did not.
He did not.
He did
was
not.
arrested in Bismarck, North Dakota, under the name Harry Y. Cohan, less than a year later on May 27th, 1932, for the charge of swindling. And then in August of 1939, he's arrested in Fairfield, Iowa, for the charge of embezzlement and spent 25 days in the county jail.
25 for embezzlement?
Yes, it didn't say the amount. That was the thing, yeah. August 1940, he's arrested in Oakland, California for violation of Section 2141 of the Business and Professionals Code, which is practicing medicine without a license.
No.
He's ordered to pay $250, given 6 months restitution, $136 in cost. He's fled, and the Board of Medical Examiners are searching for him. October 1941, a year later, he's arrested for fortune-telling in St. Johnsbury, Vermont. A year later, in February 1942, he's arrested for fortune-telling in Provo, Utah. In August 1942, he's arrested in Spencer, Iowa, under investigation for his involvement in obtaining money under false pretenses in South Dakota.
Whew.
So this is a lifelong con game that this man held. And if this is correct, I believe he dies 14th of August, 1943, and is buried in Colorado.
Okay.
But
Which would make sense if that's where his family is.
yeah, if they remain there. So that is a ghost in the background that we just heard.
If we have a ghost in this building, which people like to think that we do.
Yes, yeah. But maybe it was Sam Stevens making his presence known from the other side.
Hi, Sam.
Hi, Sam. Yes.
Yeah, I hear once a con man, like always a con man. It's an easy way to make a living, and it's hard to. I was just watching an old movie about a con man, and he like says that he went straight, but then he was like building dog tracks and conning people out of money. Anyway, not important. Robert Taylor was in it. It's called John Eager. Lana Turner was also in it. Who was born in Wallace, Idaho? It all comes back.
Wow.
Yeah. Sorry.
Good. Bringing it back. Yeah. So that is Sam Stevens. I thought it'd be an interesting one to get off of abortion and murder and.
Also, Anthony has a picture here of his headstone, and it says "Our Daddy" on the headstone, which is cute. What's that symbol?
I
don't know
couldn't
what
tell
that
you
is.
accurately. I don't want to
Because I know that
but...
some. So when my grandfather died in December, and you could choose symbols, like religious symbols that you could put on the gravestone, and that looks like, I mean, I don't know which one it looks like, but it looks like that could be one of them, where it's just like a generic religious symbol.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, it
looks like
a
it looks like a
flame.
genie lamp with a flame in the middle, and then like two little things on the side.
I didn't want to say genie lamp, but that was kind of what I was thinking.
Listen, I'm not saying that's what it is.
Yes,
but I'm just my frame of reference is that's what it looks like.
It would kind of make sense.
I
with
mean,
his
no disrespect to any sort of religion. If
absolutely,
that's just the only frame of reference I have for what that looks like.
And the date on this for his birth year, March 4th, 1882. That's a year off from what the prison's records said. And he was born in 1881. But of course, a lot of these guys, they're coming under aliases. They're not going to
totally.
If they might tell you one truth but fudge the rest, so that until the FBI gets their fingerprints and checks them out in the database, our administrators wouldn't know until then.
Right.
And then they'd be like, oh, also Tom Robson wanted in Wisconsin. And,
right. That's what's so fun about being in here, or like being researchers in here, is that you get these records. Like when I was talking about Grace Elizabeth Scott last time, how she was like, I was born in 1897. And I was like, well, that's weird. Like the census record says 1893. And then I found out that her mother died in 1895. So it's impossible for you to have been born in 1897. And yeah, but that's like, what prison officials are going to be like, you're lying.
Right. Yeah.
No one. But that's what's fun for us as researchers is finding these discrepancies and figuring out like what's true and what's not.
Yeah. Yeah. And then like in his case, sometimes never knowing the truth.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
Listen, went to the grave.
Next week I will do an inmate who I have no idea who she is, what she is.
Yeah.
We'll do Mary Holmes next week.
Mary Holmes.
She's fascinating.
Oh, okay.
I was gonna do Athalia Bybee, but I feel like we should do her and her husband together. So.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna look for one with a really cool, daring escape.
Ooh, that'll be
that's
fun.
what I'll look for. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, nice job, Anthony.
Yeah,
your
too,
research
Skye.
is so thorough. I appreciate it.
Oh, yours is too. Thank you for writing the book literally on the 217 women that served time here. I learn every week. I learn, like I've of course studied Josie quite a bit in the trial in 1902 and Arnie and his connection.
Yeah.
But I haven't gone in this depth, and I am going to steal this sheet that you have because that's incredible. I'm so glad that that's been done.
And again, I wish I could take credit, but really Paula Huff Bryant did most of it. So thank you. Again, if she's listening, I can't thank you enough because you did an excellent job at researching so deep.
Another interesting thing, there's no warden's biennial report in 1902. That's one of our missing ones. And I think it has to do with the trial and everything that was going on.
Makes sense.
If you happen to have warden's biennial reports in your attic right now and you're listening to this, go grab them. And if you have a 1902, I am dying to look at it because we have these gaps of information. And that's the only place that I think we're going to end up finding these things.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yay.
Well, Skye, do your own time.
Do your own number.
See you next week.
Yes.